and it is my privilege to conduct this service today for Esma Felmingham, and to stand here with you as you mourn the loss of a special person in your lives. Due to COVID and this difficult time, when we need the support of our loved ones and extended family, we are being asked to physically and socially isolate. The loss of a loved one continues to unite us mentally, psychologically and emotionally. And with those that are unable to be here in person, but are here in spirit, holding you in their hearts, and while only you, the immediate family, are here, you are being supported from afar through the wonders of live streaming, and I welcome those people watching and thank them for joining us today. We express our sympathy to Esma's family, her children, Robbie deceased, Debbie, Owen, Margie and Jen, and their partners Sandra, Paul, Mark and Joe. Esma was a loving grandmother to 14 grandchildren: Jason, Trent, Nisha, Vanessa, Sam, Jessie, Tom, Brett, Shani, Jake, Angie, Ben, Jade and Ellie. Esma was also a great-grandmother to 20 great-grandchildren, and we express our love today to Mitchell, Josh, Marley, Ella, O'Day, Bowden, Bella, Maddie, Lily, Amelia, Isaac, Sienna, Georgie, Emily, Lara, Torin, Ree, Amali, Tig and Lacey. Our thoughts today are also with Reg Payne, who is deceased, and Lindsay Felmingham, deceased, and Lindsay's family, Stephen, Craig, Daryl, Glenn and Lisa, and to their extended families, our thoughts are with you all. I welcome everyone of Esma's family and friends that she loved and cherished, as you loved and cherished her. Today's ceremony holds this sacred space to not only celebrate Esma's well-lived life through stories, shared memories and music, but also for you to share your sorrow and great loss of such a special person in your lives. You have gathered here because you are united in grief. You have a strong bond and only a family can have. The comfort you offer each other at this time is such a gift. Grief is personal, and it will be different to all of you in the days to come. You may cry in great sadness. You may laugh loudly. You may need to walk side by side with others, or you may need to be by yourself. However, there is no right or wrong way to grieve, but it is important to make space to do what you need to do. It is true to say that yes, death is final, but love doesn't end with dying or leave with the last breath. For someone you have loved dearly, love goes on forever. You all have your personal relationships with Esma to keep. All you need to do is pause and remember her. As we celebrate her life today, you can take satisfaction that Esma was and still is a part of your lives. Her influence endures and will continue in the love that flows from her character and deeds. As I sat with Esma's family the other day, and I thank them for that, they shared their mother's story with me. We will remember Esma as being a very caring, kind, loving and capable person. Esma didn't always have an easy life, but she always remained positive, resilient and organised. Although I heard she does things flat out, and she was a bit of a dynamo. I'm told that she was still making her beautiful cards the day before she died. That's how positive she was. She has passed on many of her good old-fashioned values to the next generation. And now, to hear more of Esma's life stories, I would like to invite her daughters Debbie and Jen to come forward, please.
How do you condense 93 years into a few pages? It's pretty difficult, but we tried. Born on the 21st of May 1928, our mum, Esma Felmingham, was the youngest child of Robert and Sarah Curry of Cobram. Her siblings, Keith, Ivan, Vera, were 8 to 16 years older than her. So she spent much of her childhood being treated as the little girl who often got in the way. Because of the age difference, she remembers having to entertain herself a lot and not being allowed to do many of the things she wanted to try. She often lamented that she was never allowed to ride a horse or swim like her siblings. As adults, we laugh about how, when we were kids, Mum would take us to the river or to the channel for a swim. As Mum was the only supervising adult, we're not really sure what would have happened if one of us had got into difficulty, because she'd never learned to swim herself. We guess in her eyes it was more important for us to have had the experience she didn't, and not be held back as she was. Growing up, Mum enjoyed attending school, travelling by horse and gig, driven by her father or sister. As she got older, her brothers bought her a bicycle to ride the several miles into town. As a student, she was quite competitive, often reminding us that she was the fastest skipper in the school. We would quietly scoff at this self-appraisal, as there were only 30 kids in the whole school. But finding a certificate later in her album proved she actually was a champion skipper, and she really did come first at the Tungamas District School Sports. Mum loved to learn, although she didn't always find it easy. She enjoyed history and always loved to read. She told us she was disappointed when she had to leave school at the end of year 8, at only 14 years of age, because she still had so much she wanted to learn. By this time, her 2 brothers were enlisted in the war and her sister had married, so she was required at home to assist on the farm. In August the following year, her brother Ivan died in New Guinea, and her mother went into a severe depression. Suddenly, the role of housekeeper was a mum's responsibility, and she had to take over the complete running of the household, preparing all the meals, keeping the house, doing the laundry, as well as attending to all the animals. Mum recently told us that during this time, she was expected to cook the smoked cod for her father's lunch on Good Friday, a tradition the family always followed, as meat was never to be eaten on Good Friday in those days. Mum had never cooked smoked cod, so without thinking, she rolled it in flour and fried it in the pan. As this fish is very salty and should be boiled, frying it meant it was totally inedible. With no suitable meat for them to eat, and under strict instructions from her dad to never tell a soul, they ate lamb that Good Friday instead. Mum was heartbroken that she got this task wrong, and breaking rules was something she was very uncomfortable with. It was during this time that she learned to be well organised and very thrifty, never throwing away anything that could be reused. As a teenager, Mum played basketball, now known as netball, for 6 years with the Cobram basketball team, serving as both captain of the team and secretary of the club. Nearly 50 years later, the 1946 team met up again, much to Mum's pleasure. I think they were all there too. Being so isolated on the farm and desperately wanting friends, she found an advertisement in the paper to become a pen pal. The thought of getting lots of mail sounded exciting to Mum, and she quickly had chosen about a dozen teenagers who she wanted to write to. Unfortunately, This dream was squashed pretty quickly as her older sister told her that she could only write to 2. Who would have thought that the 2 pen pals she chose, Gwen and Glad, would become her lifelong friends, and Gwen would be her only bridesmaid at her wedding. Growing up, we had lots of holidays and parties with the families of Gwen Owen and Glad Beasy, and Mum continued the connection with their children, receiving a letter in the mail only a few weeks ago. Around the age of 17, Saturday night dances had begun at the Cabinet Hall. Mum would ride her bike into town to attend, and it wasn't long before she met our father, Reg. He was a dashing, good-looking fellow who was a particularly good dancer. They soon became an item and dated for 3 years before becoming engaged. They then waited a further 2 years for a house to become available to rent before they could marry. Settling in Cadamatite, they had our brother Robbie, and 12 months later they had a very premature little girl, me. As I had to stay in hospital until I was strong enough to come home, Mum would daily express her breast milk and send it to Numurga with the male nan, who would deliver it to the hospital for the nurses to feed me. That's dedication. Within 2 months of my birth, Mum and Dad moved to Strathmerton, where they had 3 more children, Owen, Mahi and Jen. They were a very sociable couple, with card nights and parties often being held at the house. Reg, our father, died suddenly at age 41, leaving Mum with the mammoth task of bringing up 5 children on her own. The eldest Robbie was 15 and the youngest Jen was 6. Mum had no money, lived in a rented house and had a car on hire purchase. This left her with no option but to find work very quickly. She was offered work part-time in the local stock carrier's office, but needed to take on additional jobs to help make ends meet. She began working at the local fish and chip shop to cover the lunchtime rush, and then worked nights and weekends with Vice Catering as a waitress. Although very tiring and working long hours, she loved waitressing and she was good at it. Fast on her feet, efficient and very organised. She loved this job and became a close friend of the Vice family. Unexpectedly then, she was asked by the manager of the Kraft Foods factory to take on the position of receptionist. This was a daunting offer for Mum, who had limited experience in this sort of work. But in true Mum's style, she took on the job and relished in the work. She loved meeting new people and gained a purpose in life outside being a mother and a housekeeper. She was highly thought of at Kraft and became the first woman to achieve 10 years of service at the Strathmerton Kraft factory. As children, we remember nothing was expected of us at home. Mum did everything. She worked all day at her job, did the cooking, washing, maintained the house and the yard. I remember my usual practice was to leave an unmade bed, go to school and come home to a made bed and a tidy room. Mum would have come home from work during her lunch hour and made all the beds. It couldn't have been an easy time, but she never complained. She took on all her roles with persistence and pride. Looking at our own lives now as working mothers, we can only imagine how tired she must have been, and on reflection, how ungrateful we were, although we didn't recognise it then. Years later, after all the children had left home, Mum returned to ballroom dancing with her good friend Hazel Lawrence. It was there she met Mrs Felmingham, a retired dairy farmer, who became her dance partner and later her second husband. Mum loved ballroom dancing and often told us about how after a dance their friends would come home for supper and they would all continue dancing, perfecting new steps up and down the hallway. Mum was always elegantly dressed and deservingly became the proud winner of Matron of the Ball on several occasions.
After marrying Lindsay and moving to Shepparton, Mum became stepmother to Lindsay's 5 children. This again was a new experience for her as she supported Lindsay with his family. Over the years, she's continued to build strong relationships with all his kids and their partners and families. After 16 years of service, Mum finally retired and to spend more time with Lindsay. She joined the East Shepparton's Bowls Club, not really interested in playing bowls, but deciding to join Lindsay, who was already a member. Well, it didn't take long for her competitive nature to shine. She found she loved playing bowls, and again, she was good at it. Soon it became her life. She made many friends and enjoyed travelling to numerous competitions around the region, achieving lots of success. She served on the match committee and the pennant selection committee, and in her time won 2 club championships for long bowls and 2 for cupboard bowls, which they played during the winter. Around this time, I was also asked to model for Bloom's Fashions for the annual church fashion parade. She called it a mannequin parade. Around this time, this started a long history of modelling for Bloom's Fashions every year at Scott's Church in Shepparton. She did this right up until she was 90 and loved it, often purchasing the clothes she modelled. Once retired, Mum also joined a craft group in Shepparton and learned how to make homemade cards. She adored this craft and over years has spent many countless hours making hundreds of birthday and Christmas cards for her family and friends. Mum was so super organised, she would have the cards made months beforehand, addressed and stamped, ready to send on the appropriate date. Consequently, some of you will still receive cards from Mum, as we are under strict instructions to make sure we send them out. Right up until the week before her passing, she was insistent on completing a couple of unfinished cards in time to send. Mum enjoyed a long life wish of travelling to England, which she did with Owen in 1994. A lot of this trip was dedicated to her researching family history, which she became very passionate about. Together with a small team including her nephew and niece Ray and Tina Ford, they researched, planned, wrote and published the Curry family history with information dating back to the 1820s. The team organised a book launch in 2006 for the extended Curry family members to attend. The day was a huge success and finished with the family visiting the original home, Cumberland House, built in Betley near Denali in Victoria. Due to the hard work and dedication of the team, we are now the recipients of an amazing account of our ancestors' lives to pass on to our children and hopefully to add to as time goes on. Continuing with the passion for history, Mum also began researching the Payne family history, travelling several times to Tasmania with Owen, where they tracked the areas our father and his family worked, thus producing another family history resource for the extended Payne family. Right up until her passing, Mum could tell you the names of all her ancestors and their children and their life stories. When we were young, we weren't necessarily interested in all the family stories she would tell us, but as we got older, we just couldn't get enough. And whilst we were caring for her during her illness, we encouraged her to tell us everything she could, just so we could hear them one more time. Mum loved flowers, and she could always find something in the garden to pick and display in a vase on the kitchen table. She was an avid gardener and would spend hours pottering in the garden, still growing her veggies and citrus fruit up until recently. Time would just pass when she was in the garden, and we would often be given a bag of her produce to take home. In 2005, Mum and Lindsay decided to downsize, so they sold up at Shep and moved to the Oasis village in Cobram. One of Mum's first goals was to join the bowling club. It didn't take long for her to settle into the club, make new friendships and play in a winning team. On the clubroom wall you will see photos of her in the pennant team and her name printed on the honour board for all to see. A recent sympathy card from the Bowls Club described Mum as being their little pocket rocket, an apt description of our Mum. Mum made great friends in the Oasis village and also from Green Palms. She joined the craft group and enjoyed sharing her card making skills. She attended all the functions she could at the hall, indoor bowls, exercise group, fundraisers and social events. Her great neighbours, Ken and Brenda, have been particularly supportive and caring of Mum in her final years, and they've also cared for us over the last few weeks, and we thank them sincerely. As Lindsay's health declined, Mum became his carer, which limited her social activities. Fortunately, she was invited to join a carers group, which allowed her to build some strong friendships and gain support from other people in caring roles. Again, Mum loved this time and enjoyed the lunches out with her new friends. Mum also belonged to the church guild, where she would assist whenever she could with fundraising activities. Through church, Mum enjoyed a reconnection with some of her old friends from Strathie and loved being part of this community again. Mum had a good sense of humour and especially enjoyed English comedies. TV shows like Keeping Up with Appearances or As Time Goes By were some of her favourites. She would watch them over and over again, laughing as though she'd never seen them before. Mum loved spending time with her family, celebrating our last New Year's Eve together. It was Mum who instigated having a card night to keep us entertained until midnight. She wasn't having much luck that night, so informed us she wanted to change chairs with one of us because she wasn't in the winning seat. At 92, she sat up till nearly 1 a.m. playing cards, singing old songs and sharing a few jokes. It was a fun night and we'll treasure it in our memory forever. We remember Mum as always being busy. In fact, we often had to make an appointment to see her because her diary was so full. She had a continual to-do list, important events to attend and people she couldn't let down. When she received her final terminal diagnosis, her first comment was, "But I still have so many plans." She was devastated. Mum dedicated her life to her family. We were always greeted with open arms, a smiling face and a 3-course meal. She loved to cook and was renowned for Anzac biscuits and trifles. She took pride in remembering how everyone had their cup of tea or coffee and the skill learned when she was in her waitressing days. She loved to have the table set formally, ready for a guest with a different plate for everything. We'd laugh at the number of unnecessary plates which she used when we were doing the dishes. Always an experimental cook and wanting to impress us with something new, she thought she would try an avocado dish for Christmas once a year. Never using avocado before, she wasn't really sure what to do with it. We found out much later, after finishing a bowl of fruit salad, that it had an extra green ingredient in it. Yep, she added the avocado to the fruit salad. As small children, we would always have to run to keep up with Mum, and that never really changed. As she got older, she had 2 speeds, fast and faster. We finally referred to her just recently as Scooter, because that's what she was like. She'd scoot around everywhere. Even when in hospital recently, the nurses were amazed at her ability to get up and around so quickly. Not waiting for their assistance, Mum thought they'd be way too busy looking after the sick people. Always extremely supportive in any endeavour we undertook. Mum never put any pressure on us, but we knew at the same time she had high expectations and we never wanted to disappoint her. She was a terrific support to us, a good listener who offered sound advice. If we were unwell, she would ring daily to check on us. In palliation, Mum knew her time was limited and her thoughts were never still. Even then, she was busy organising us, giving us orders and attempting to balance the workload for us, knowing our strengths. Right up until the end, she was concerned I wasn't getting enough sleep and would regularly tell me to go and have a cat nap. Mum always was concerned for us rather than herself. When discussing with our siblings what we thought were the most important attributes Mum displayed, it didn't take us long to agree it was her honesty and integrity. We were proud of our Mum and all that she achieved. Coming from such a sheltered childhood and working through some very traumatic times very early in her life, she was a staple in our lives, and even if we didn't have much, we knew we were always loved and had a place to come home to. Ezzy left behind a huge legacy of 5 children, 14 grandchildren, 20 great-grandchildren, with number 21 coming in a couple of days. Every one of us is feeling the pain of not having her in our lives anymore, but we know the wonderful memories we'll share together will help us in the future, and she'll never be forgotten.
Thank you very much, Debbie and Jen. That was beautiful stories. And I'd now like to call upon Esma's grandson, Sam Hazel, to come forward and share his stories of his grandmother with us. Thanks, Sam.
talk today just to tell a couple of stories about Nan from when we were kids. My brothers Jesse and Tom, we had a little catch up the other day and had a little chat about it. And we had a few stories that came to mind, so I thought it'd be good to share some of those. The first thing I want to sort of talk about is when Nan would come and visit us as kids in Badaguinea. We know she was coming. It was always exciting to get visitors in Badaguinea. There wasn't many people there, so when we heard somebody was coming, we were all pretty happy about it. And around the corner would come this little mandarin Datsun that I reckon was about 20 years old from my first memory of it. She drove the thing for another 20 years too. I don't know how long it was by the end. Can't imagine the safety features of that. A couple of candles for lights or whatever happened with it. But she'd pull in the driveway there and we'd come bursting out as kids, wanting to know what was in the car. We'd dive into the baskets in the back. She'd always have a present for us, but there's always big Anzac biscuits or a trifle or all those wonderful things that she made that we always just expected to turn up, plus something else. She'd come along to our school concerts at the end of the year. That was always a highlight, having a visitor to come for that and come back for a cup of tea afterwards and some more Anzac biscuits or a slice or something that she's whipped up. And she'd come and look after us in Badaguinea sometimes, and we should always bring these amazing craft activities for us to do as kids, and we'd make little Christmas decorations or things like that. She had every little piece there set ready for us and was so patient with us while we got through it. His always looked amazing. Tom was a bit younger, his was a bit slapped together, and mine looked like I put it together with two left hands. But Nan would always fix it, and she was so encouraging with the whole thing. We'd go to visit Nan sometimes over in Shepparton, and we get there. I don't remember much about the Strathmerton house, a tiny bit I do, but over in Shepparton we do, and we get there, and the same things were always there, the same amazing foods. But some of our memories there are basically the carpet bowls that we used to play up and down the hallway at the house there. I can't imagine the noise that would have made for everybody who's trying to catch up with these little balls bashing into the wall at 100 miles an hour, or they'd hit the tiles and bang, 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 and make heaps of noise. Those are just some of the memories that we had. We'd go there. We've all seen it. I don't know how old a toy box is, but there's this little ape mask that sits in that toy box. That thing's forever old. Every time, even my kids, when they later on would go and visit, they'd get it out and they'd love playing with the ape mask. God, I remember doing that when I was a kid. I remember Tom came up with that surprised me, that made me laugh too. We didn't stay at Nan's house often, but a couple of times we did, and I don't know when Mum and Dad were, but Nan was looking after us, and we'd go to bed, and Nan had this way of making sure that you never got out of bed. She'd tuck you in. Oh. Just be locked in this position all the night, thinking, I can't have a bed, I'm not going to fight it. We were that well tucked in. I remember Tom saying, "Get everybody out smooth." No, we slept very well. Another memory was us coming from Badaguinea. We had no water there, so our baths were only ever a couple of inches deep, just enough to get us wet. Over to Shepparton where there was plenty of water, and it was like a swimming pool in the bath, and it filled right to the top. Nan was always so proud of her garden. Jen mentioned it before, but she's always telling us about veggies or bringing you something that she's grown in the garden, or walking you through the garden and telling you what she's planted and what's going on with it. A couple of other memories that came to mind were the trifle that we always had at Christmas time. I've never had it anywhere else, either in that makes it, I think. And she was just always so busy. You rarely ever saw her sitting. If she was sitting, she was eating, or if she was sitting in an armchair, she was knitting or doing something. She was always doing something. She never just sat. A lot of the quirky words, Jen mentioned a few of them before, she always come up with little mispronunciations of words that always made us laugh. The girls, I'm surprised they didn't talk about it already. There is an infamous coat hanger incident that happened years ago. I don't know enough about the details, but it's been an ongoing joke for a long, long time. Whenever we get together, the coat hanger's being passed around. Her ability to take photos and cut off the heads of everybody and just take them to their shoes is renowned. Very special. Actually, we got, when we came over the other day to get some furniture, Mum gave us a little photo album for each of our families. That's got one for me, it's got one for Mo and I together, and our little kids as well. Just all these things that she's collected or photos she's taken, or things that we sent her that were in there too. It's just an amazing memory to keep. And I guess the other thing that was also mentioned that I just want to talk about today were the amazing birthday cards that we'd always look forward to. That somehow arrive, even with Australia Post, a week before your birthday, this card would pop up in the mail, $5 notes that you take inside of it. And then realise I probably don't need $5 anymore, but we put it together and make sure we did something for that as well. Then we go and visit her over in Cobram here, and it's like you get a little 3-course meal and a high tea, and you'd only be there a couple of hours, but and I was almost guilty coming over, because I felt she's going to just run around a million miles an hour just for us to come and see her. But we thought the idea that she probably loved it, and that's what she liked to do, so it was always a fun experience, and I know the kids loved it. Anyway, that's all I want to say tonight, and yeah, you'll be missed now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Times have changed, haven't they? You hear wonderful stories. We're now going to view a video sent to us by some of Esma's grandchildren, and this will be followed by family pictures acknowledging her life's journey and remind us that memories are now the greatest possession that we have.
Things I'll remember about my Nan are the annual birthday cards that she would spend so much time creating for her family, her friends, her kids, her grandkids and her great-grandkids. She would put money in every single one of them, and I bet she would know everyone's birth dates off by heart as well. One of my favourite childhood memories was receiving her cards in the mail and seeing how much each year she'd changed her card detailing styles. Another fond memory I have is going to Nan's in the school holidays and having freshly squeezed orange juice in the mornings, fighting the cousins over her Anzac biscuits and having her famous steamed puddings. We would always play with her bowl set and smash them down the corridor in her house, which she never minded. And I can remember wearing her tiny little slippers when I was about in grade 5 and thinking how small Nan was. Hearing her scoot across the floor at 1,000,000 miles an hour reminded me how much she just never rested. Another memory of Nan includes how much she would muddle up her words, but she would say them with such confidence that even I was left guessing whether I had the word right. For instance, when her TV turned digital, not digital, and she couldn't work out how to use it, or when she couldn't get her usual meal from the local pub because of the COVID, or wearing a pair of moccasins, not moccasins, or using wipeout on her cards, not whiteout. I watched this trait also pass on to my mum over the years, thinking this was hilarious. However, now I've started noticing that I'm doing it as well, so thanks for the genetics, Nan. But most of all, I will remember my Nan by her strength, her courage, her no-fuss personality that made everyone who met her feel comfortable to be around her. She always cared for everyone else, putting herself last. The most selfless person you'll ever meet would be my Nan, and she was the glue to our large family. Love you, Nan. We miss you.
Hello, my name's Angie and I'm Esme's granddaughter. In many ways, I owe my life to Nana. When I was conceived in the 70s, those were the days of forced abortions, forced adoptions, disowning young women in need, or sending them to Melbourne for a holiday, only for them to return to their country town, depressed, sad, traumatised, never the same ever again. Nana didn't do any of those things. Instead, she offered my mother and father love and support. She signed the paper to allow them to marry. She didn't judge them or disapprove or shame them or withdraw her love. She did what we now know today to be the loving, supportive response, but was perhaps less common back then in the 70s. She loved my mum, pregnant or not, and gave her the support my mum needed to birth me. I often think Nana was ahead of the times without really realising it. From asking questions about taboo topics like pregnancy and childbirth to her own mum in the 30s, to raising 5 kids on her own in the 60s, to working multiple jobs to make ends meet, to being a working woman in the 70s and 80s, to growing her own food, sewing her own clothes and managing her own affairs. In many ways she was a proto-feminist, or at least leading a feminist life without quite realising it. I certainly learned subconsciously that women could raise families and be independent and lead contented lives on their own. This continues to be a source of strength for me. As a single mother myself, I often turned to Nana and asked her, how did you do it? How did you make it through? "Well," she said in her stoic Taurian voice, "there's no other choice, is there? You have to do it. You have to get up and keep going." And she was right. Even as we sit in lockdown in Melbourne today, the way to make it through is to get up and keep going, which is what she did until she couldn't any longer. These days, I lean on her strategies and her strength to make it through the days. I've adopted her system of washing the dishes so they don't pile up, of sustainability and preserving fruit and washing my plastic to recycle, of getting up, getting breakfast going, starting the day with hope and positivity, if not for myself, then at least for my child, just as she did. In all my life, I never saw her wake in the morning cranky or sleeping in or still in pajamas or unable to make me and her guests a full 3-course cooked breakfast. To this day, freshly squeezed orange juice in the morning is something that will always connect me to her. And this is my overall memory of Nana, surrounded by soft, warm, golden light, smiling, generous, doing something for you before something for herself, efficient and keeping the day moving, always having something to do. And when I close my eyes and imagine Nana, I see ironed shirts, her immaculately clean orange Datsun, the Weet-Bix container, the biscuit container, always full of freshly baked biscuits, the best Anzac recipe I've ever tasted. Active, action, always moving, always doing something and having something to do. And she remains so active until only very recently. I can hear her stories of her childhood, a time so foreign to myself and my son, yet so vivid in my recollections. I can see her churning the butter, listening to the wireless by kerosene lamp, listening to her father read the newspaper out loud at night, taking the horse and buggy to school or to collect the mail, preparing the oven to prepare the hot lunch for the men who went out in the hot fields to prepare the soil and the cattle. She took the fast-paced development of the time in her stride, understanding and talking about Facebook, learning how to use an iPhone and FaceTime just last year. My heart glows happily at the thought of her watching the SBS talk show Insight, discussing modern issues like trans teens. Her inner child finally able to listen to people discussing taboo topics candidly. Her inner curiosity satisfied. She may have never lived a life like her beloved Anne of Green Gables books, but she did take on board these modern issues. She talked about enjoying the drag show of lay girls. She travelled overseas. She kept lifelong pen pals. She tended her own garden. For a girl from Caddy, I think she came fairly close. From Nana, I learned that a woman in slacks and a gloriously 70s synthetic shirt could do anything. And as the sky clouds over and the dishes pile up, and I wake tired and strained, because of my Nana, I know I can make it through the day. Thank you.
I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebird birds fly beyond the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't I? You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamt I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
A special thank you to Ellie and Ange for those wonderful stories via video and some great memories there. So today we have been treated to a snapshot of Esme's 93 rich and fulfilling years through our eulogies and the wonderful selections of photos we've just seen. Many more stories and memories will be shared amongst you. These stories will bring tears to your eyes and a smile to your face. They are your family stories, and they will be great for healing as they are passed down to the generations to come, knowing that the spirit of Esma lives on, not only through stories, but also through you. So I'd like to share this poem with you. Dear Mum, how did you find the energy, Mum, to do all the things you did? To be teacher, nurse and counsellor to us when we were kids. How did you do it, Mum? Be chauffeur, cook and friend. And stay patient, kind and caring. We just can't comprehend. How did you stay strong, Mum, when the hurdles of life were rough? Your resilience, hard work and strength meant we never did it tough. I see now it was love, Mum, when you guided us on our way. Your inexhaustible love, Mum, and we thank you every day. So today's ceremony is drawing to a close, but before we finish, the family would like to thank Dr. Chrissy and the nursing staff at the Cobram Hospital, the palliative care team and the district nurses who took such great care of Esma. A special thanks to her wonderful neighbours Ken and Brenda. Your wonderful care and support was much appreciated. Esma was the matriarch of your family, guiding you with her wisdom through the power of her example. She walked gently on this earth and gave to you and others without expectation. It is now time to say farewell to this beloved woman. We will keep wonderful memories of her in our hearts, at peace in our minds, and at peace with each other, because of what she has taught us and what she has left behind, leaving us with sweet memories of all the good things she meant to everyone who knew her and everyone she knew. It is our opportunity to say farewell, which is the rite of passage that allows us to finally let her go to her everlasting rest. We will look back with gratitude for having had her in our lives, and that she shared her love and joyfully shared her life with us. So on behalf of Esma's family, I thank you all for coming here today and sharing in the celebration of her life. Thank you to her family and friends for joining us today via the live streaming. Our thoughts and hearts go out to you. Following this service, Esma will be laid to rest at the Carmelite Cemetery. So may she rest in peace. Thank you, everyone. Would the coffin bearers please come forward? Would everybody stand, please?